I found a mirror at an estate sale. It wasn't the kind of thing I usually bought. I wasn't much of a collector, and I had no real taste for antiques. But something about it drew me in. It leaned against the far wall of the basement, away from the tables of porcelain dolls and yellowed books, half covered with a dust-stiffened sheet. The seller, an older woman with pale, watchful eyes, noticed me staring. "That was in his study," she said quietly. "My father's. He insisted it stay covered. Said it didn't belong to him, that it belonged to someone else. But he kept it anyway." I asked her what she meant, but she only shook her head, muttered something about it being a conversation piece, and let me take it for $20. The mirror was heavy, framed in tarnished silver with strange, curling designs etched into the metal. The glass itself was flawless, unnaturally clear, as though it had never aged. I hauled it back to my apartment, leaning it against the wall in the corner of my living room. It was larger than I expected, taller than me, wide enough that it seemed to take up more space than it should. That first night, I didn't think much of it. I set it there, cracked open a beer, and scrolled on my phone. But every so often, I caught myself glancing at it. Not just to check my reflection, something deeper, like the way you look at a dark doorway, convinced you'll see movement. The glass seemed to drink the room in, swallowing every shadow, reflecting it back with too much clarity. And once, just once, I thought I saw myself blink a second too late. I shook it off. Just fatigue, I told myself. But I didn't sleep well. The next morning, the first thing I did after waking was glance at the mirror. My reflection looked normal. Rumpled hair, tired eyes, the faded t-shirt I'd fallen asleep in. But something about it still made me uneasy. I leaned closer, half expecting to see a crack or stain in the glass. Instead, I saw the faintest hint of something else. Not in the mirror, behind me. A blur, low to the ground, gone as soon as I turned. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. I need more coffee. But the moment lingered. Over the next few days, the mirror began to feel less like furniture and more like a presence. It pulled at me whenever I walked through the room, demanding my attention. Sometimes I would catch myself standing in front of it for long minutes, staring into my own face until the world blurred at the edges. Once, I woke in the middle of the night and found myself standing there, staring at my reflection without remembering how I'd gotten out of bed. The mirror showed me faithfully, of course, always faithfully, but there were moments, fleeting, subtle, when something felt wrong. A shadow not quite in sync, a flicker of movement when I was still, the faint suggestion of another expression, sorrow, maybe, or fear, that vanished when I focused on it. I told myself it was just my imagination. Antiques have history. They carry atmosphere, the weight of years. But then came the night that changed everything. I'd had a rough day at work, one of those days where everything that could go wrong did. I came home drained, tossed my bag down, and collapsed on the couch. The mirror loomed across the room, its glass catching the dim light. I stared at it without meaning to. My reflection stared back, weary but ordinary. Then, slowly it began to change. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. My reflection seemed darker, its features hollowed. My skin in the glass took on a grayish cast, my eyes dull and sunken. I leaned forward, heart pounding. The reflection leaned forward too, but a fraction too late. And then, with sickening clarity, I realized what I was seeing. It was me, but not me alive. The skin in the glass sagged, pale and lifeless. My lips were bluish, parted slightly, my hair limp. My body slumped forward, stiff, unmoving. It was my face, but drained of all vitality. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My reflection snapped back to normal, breathing, blinking, alive. I stood frozen, gasping, the taste of copper sharp in my mouth. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I was exhausted, stressed, seeing things that weren't there. But deep down I knew. The mirror had shown me something I wasn't supposed to see. I threw the sheet back over it that night, telling myself I'd haul it out to the curb in the morning. But when morning came, the sheet was gone. I found it crumpled on the floor, as though it had been yanked off, and the mirror was waiting. I tried to convince myself it hadn't happened. That night, when the mirror showed me a version of myself drained of life, stiff and gray, that had been exhaustion. A hallucination. A brain trick born of stress and poor lighting. That's what I told myself over and over, pacing the apartment, refusing to look at the mirror even though I could feel it watching me. But the harder I tried to ignore it, the stronger the pull became. By the third day, I couldn't help it. Curiosity gnawed at me, sharp and insistent, like hunger. I peeled the sheet away, just enough to peek. My reflection stared back. Normal. Breathing. Alive. For hours I checked it, over and over, daring it to flicker again. I convinced myself it wouldn't, that I'd just let my nerves get the better of me. Until the night, it showed me someone else. It was late, well past midnight, and I'd been lying awake, restless. The city outside was quiet, traffic a distant hum. Finally, I got up for water and passed through the living room. The mirror loomed there, uncovered, impossible to ignore. I froze, because there was a figure in it. Not me. At least, not exactly. It was my neighbor from down the hall, Mrs. Larkin. She was an older woman, kind enough, always smiling when we passed each other in the building. I saw her reflection clearly, as though she were standing in my living room. But she wasn't alive. Her skin was pallid, her lips tinged blue. Her eyes stared upward, glassy, unfocused. Her body was sprawled awkwardly, arms limp at her sides. I stumbled back, choking on air, and then the image was gone. The mirror showed only me again, wide-eyed and trembling, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I barely slept that night, lying awake with the covers pulled tight, staring into the darkness. The next morning, I tried to tell myself I'd imagined it. But that afternoon, as I was leaving for work, I saw a group of people gathered near the elevators. The building manager was there, speaking in a low voice. Mrs. Larkin had been found in her apartment. Collapsed. No one would give details, but I didn't need them. I knew what I'd seen. The mirror had shown me her after she died. I left the building trembling, heart pounding, unable to shake the image. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept replaying it in my head. The gray skin, the vacant eyes, the stillness. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't coincidence. The mirror showed death. I avoided it as long as I could, but that night, something in me gave in. I stood in front of it again, hands shaking, staring into the glass. At first, it was just me. Then, slowly, the background shifted. The reflection showed a hallway I didn't recognize. A man appeared, maybe in his 30s, wearing a suit and tie. His face was unfamiliar, but I couldn't look away. He stumbled forward, clutching his chest, collapsing to the floor. His mouth opened in a silent cry, eyes wide with panic, before his body went still. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. And then it was gone. Just me again, shaking, pale, alive. I told myself I had to get rid of the mirror. I couldn't live with it here, couldn't keep watching people die in its glass. But when I tried to drag it out the door, it was like the weight had doubled. I could barely budge it. My arms ached, my legs trembled, my back screamed with effort. Finally, gasping and drenched in sweat, I gave up. The mirror remained. That night, I dreamed of faces. Dozens of them. Some familiar, some strangers. All lifeless. All staring at me through the glass. When I woke, the mirror was uncovered again. I hadn't touched it. The sheet lay crumpled on the floor. That was when I realized it wasn't just showing me death. It wanted me to see it. It wanted me to keep looking. And the worst part was, I did. I started checking it every night. At first, just for a moment. Then longer. I'd sit on the couch with the lights dimmed, watching the glass until the air grew heavy and still. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes hours would pass with nothing but my own reflection staring back. But then the visions would come. A woman slumped over a steering wheel, shattered glass sparkling around her. A young man sprawled at the bottom of a staircase, neck bent at an unnatural angle. A child, pale and unmoving in bed, a toy clutched tightly in one hand. Every vision left me shaken, trembling, my stomach knotted. And yet, I couldn't stop. The more I saw, the more I felt it pulling me in. As though each glimpse was a secret only I was allowed to know. A glimpse of what the world would look like after the moment life ended. I told myself it was wrong, obsessive, sick, but part of me wanted to know more. Part of me needed to. One night, I sat staring into the mirror when I noticed something new. The reflections were no longer random. I started recognizing places, streets I'd walked down, cafés y de visita, even a lobby of my own building. And the people, some were strangers, yes, but others weren't. The barista who served me coffee every morning, the security guard at my office, faces I passed daily, never really noticing, now burned into my mind as I watched their deaths play out in eerie silence. And with each vision, the dread grew sharper, because I knew, sooner or later, the mirror would turn back to me. The mirror was no longer furniture. It had become a ritual. Every night, without fail, I found myself drawn to it. I tried fighting it at first, closing the bedroom door, drowning myself in TV, even going out late just to avoid coming home. But it didn't matter. I always ended up back in front of the glass. And when I did, it rewarded me. The visions came faster now, clearer. Sometimes I saw them seconds after sitting down. At first, I thought of them as glimpses of chance. Random deaths scattered across the city, across the world. But the more I watched, the more I noticed the pattern. The mirror didn't just show death. It showed me deaths that mattered. To me, I watched my boss collapse in his office, coffee spilling across his desk. I saw a coworker of mine, slumped in her car at a red light, head lolling forward. Even the doorman in my building appeared one night, sitting lifeless on his stool by the entrance. Each time, I told myself it couldn't be real, that it was imagination, some strange trick of my mind projected onto the glass. But then the news would trickle in, emails announcing sudden passings. Notes slipped under doors. Conversations whispered in the elevator. They matched. Every single one. I was seeing them before they happened. At first, I panicked. I wanted to tell someone, warn them. But how could I? Excuse me, I saw you die in my antique mirror. They'd laugh, or worse. They'd look at me the way people look at the unwell. So I said nothing. And in the silence, something darker took root. A fascination. Each vision was horrible, yes, but it was also undeniable proof that the mirror was real. That it wasn't my imagination. That I was seeing truth, stripped bare of time. It terrified me. And yet, part of me thrilled at the secret. I knew things no one else knew. I carried knowledge the world wasn't meant to have. But the price was steep, because slowly, the visions began bleeding into the rest of my life. I'd pass a stranger on the street and feel a jolt of recognition, remembering the pale face I'd seen reflected, the still body, the vacant eyes. I'd order coffee and stare too long at the barista, wondering how many days she had left. And sometimes when I blinked too slow or turned my head too quickly, I'd see death lingering behind people like a shadow. Faint, translucent, but they're all the same. I was carrying the mirror with me, even when I wasn't standing in front of it. One evening, I sat across from the glass, trembling with exhaustion, trying to will myself to look away. But my reflection had changed. It was me, but older, paler, my hair grayer, my eyes sunken, my body slouched forward in a way that screamed of finality. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The image snapped away, leaving me gasping in the half-dark. I realized then that the mirror wasn't just showing other people. It was circling back. It was preparing me. I tried covering it again, this time with a heavy blanket, even nailing the edges to the wall so it couldn't slip free. That night, I heard the sound of fabric tearing. I refused to check, but in the morning, the blanket lay shredded on the floor. The mirror was bare, and when I dared glance at it, I froze. The glass didn't show my apartment. It showed a morgue. Rows of bodies under white sheets, stretching into shadow. The air looked cold, sterile, suffocating. And in the foreground, one sheet stirred. Slowly, deliberately it slid back, revealing my own face. Eyes closed, skin gray, mouth slightly parted as though caught in the last breath. I staggered away, bile rising in my throat, my entire body shaking with horror. When I dared look again, the morgue was gone. Just me, just my apartment. But I couldn't unsee it. The mirror had shown me where I would end. Not just how, but where. That night, I dreamed of lying on a cold slab, the air thick with disinfectant, the silence absolute. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, only to see my reflection already awake, staring at me before I could even sit up. I screamed. I smashed the bedroom lamp against the mirror, shards of glass scattering across the floor. But when I opened my eyes, the mirror was whole. Not a crack, not a scratch. And my reflection smiled. Only for a second. But I know it happened. I'm sure of it. Since then, I've stopped pretending I can escape it. The mirror doesn't just show death. It doesn't just predict it. It shapes it. Each vision is not a warning, but a command. A script written into the future. And I'm trapped inside it. Because the more I watch, the more I realize. Every reflection is a rehearsal. And one day soon, I'll see myself not in a morgue, not in some distant place, but right here in my own apartment. The mirror will show me my final moment. And when it does, I don't think I'll be able to look away. By the time I reached the 4th week of living with the mirror, I no longer questioned whether it was real. Reality had bent itself around it. My days were filled with the heavy silence of waiting, my nights consumed by the glass. I wasn't eating much, wasn't sleeping much. All that mattered was the next reflection, the next glimpse into what was coming. At first, I thought I was only a witness, that the mirror simply allowed me to peer into the inevitable. But then, one night, something happened that made me doubt everything I thought I understood. I'd been staring at the glass for nearly an hour when it rippled, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. The reflection shifted, revealing a subway platform. A man stood there, young, tall, wearing headphones. I didn't recognize him. In a vision, the platform was empty except for him. He paced, checked his phone, then stepped closer to the edge. The rumble of a train grew louder. I leaned forward, my chest tight. The man swayed, and then he fell. The image blurred, then cut to stillness. The man's body lay on the tracks, unmoving. I staggered back, heart hammering. The next morning, the news broke. A man, same description, same station, had died after falling onto the tracks late at night. It was identical, but here's the part one can't stop thinking about. I'd seen him hesitate. I'd seen him sway. He hadn't jumped. He hadn't tripped. It was like he'd been nudged. And as I replayed it in my mind, sick with dread, I remembered something even worse. In a reflection, just for an instant, I'd seen movement behind him. A shadow. My shadow. I told myself I was imagining it, that it couldn't be true. But once the thought took hold, it wouldn't let go. What if watching wasn't passive? What if by observing, I was sealing the fate of the people I saw? The mirror didn't predict. It executed. That night, I tested the idea. I sat down, stared into the glass, and whispered, "Show me." The surface shivered. A reflection formed. This time it was my coworker, Jen. She sat at her kitchen table, laughing at something on her laptop. Then the lights flickered, dimmed. Smoke curled upward. She coughed, scrambled for the stove. A flame bloomed, small at first, then growing. Her face twisted in terror. And then everything went dark. I leapt to my feet, grabbing my phone with trembling hands. I called her immediately, praying she'd answer. She did, sleepy, confused, but alive. "Is everything okay?" I asked, voice shaking. She laughed softly. "It's 2 a.m. Of course it's okay." Relief washed through me like a flood. I hung up, telling myself I disproved it, that the mirror was only a nightmare painted in glass. But the next day at work, her desk was empty. By noon, the whispers started. By 3, the official word came. An electrical fire. Her apartment. Late last night. She hadn't made it out. I sat frozen at my desk, unable to move, unable to breathe. I had called her after I saw it. I'd spoken to her, heard her laugh. And still, the mirror had been right. That was when the truth sank in, heavy as a stone in my chest. It wasn't showing me what might happen. It was showing me what would. And the more I watched, the more convinced I became that it wasn't just revealing, it was enforcing. The mirror didn't allow deviation. No matter what I did, the outcome matched. My reflection in the glass became my confession booth. I stared at it night after night, whispering apologies to the faces that flickered and faded, as though they could hear me from the other side. But the mirror was merciless. So it began showing me strangers again. A man slipping in the shower, striking his head against the tiles. A woman choking alone in a restaurant bathroom. A cyclist tumbling into traffic. I watched them all, powerless, heart hollowing out each time the image snapped to black. And then, one night, it showed me someone closer. My sister. She stood in her living room, folding laundry, humming under her breath. Then she froze. Her hand clutched her chest, eyes wide, face stricken. She collapsed, the basket spilling across the floor. I screamed at the glass. No, no, please stop. Not her. The vision faded, leaving only my reflection, wild-eyed, desperate, tears streaking my face. I called her immediately. She picked up, cheerful, alive. I begged her to see a doctor, to get checked, to be careful. She laughed it off, told me I was being dramatic. The next morning, the call came. She hadn't woken up. Heart failure, they said. Sudden, unexpected, but I'd seen it. The mirror had shown me, and nothing I did had changed it. Grief hollowed me out. Guilt gnawed at me with sharp teeth. But worse than either was the truth I couldn't escape. The mirror wasn't just showing me death. It was claiming it, and every time I looked, I gave it power. I told myself I'd stop, that I'd turn away, cover it, smash it, burn it, anything to free myself from its grip. But that night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I found myself back in front of it. The glass shimmered, and this time, it didn't show strangers. It didn't show co-workers. It didn't even show my family. It showed me. Again, not in a morgue, not on a slab, but here, in my own apartment, slumped in the very chair where I sat, eyes open but empty, mouth parted as though caught mid-breath. I stared at myself and my own inevitable end, frozen in horror as the reflection twitched, just slightly, like it was alive on the other side, watching me. Then it smiled, only for a moment, but I saw it, and I knew. The mirror wasn't waiting anymore. It was getting closer. I stopped leaving the apartment. What was the point? Out there, people bustled about, living their days in blissful ignorance. They laughed, they argued, they rushed for trains, they made plans for the weekend, never knowing that death could be standing inches behind them, ready to be reflected in silver glass. But I knew. I couldn't unknow. The mirror had stripped away the veil that lets people live without fear. It had infected my thoughts, my sleep, even my breath. My every moment was bent toward its surface. I no longer thought of days in terms of hours. I thought of them in terms of visions. How many I'd see tonight. How clear they'd be. How soon they'd come true. And then there was myself. The reflection of my own death hadn't left me. Every time I looked into the glass, I expected to see it again, me slumped in the chair, lifeless, a hollow shell staring back. Sometimes it was there. Sometimes it wasn't. But I could feel it waiting, circling, like a predator savoring its prey. At first, I told myself I could fight back. That maybe the mirror only worked because I let it. That if I refused to look, refused to give it attention, it would wither. So I tried. I stayed away, covered it with a blanket again, sat in the bedroom with the door closed, lights off, headphones blasting noise into my ears. But the pull was relentless. The longer I resisted, the stronger it grew. Like gravity, like hunger. I felt the mirror tugging at my thoughts, whispering to me without sound. It wasn't in words. It was in images, flickers of shadows behind my eyelids, glimmers of faces gone pale, flashes of empty eyes staring. I lasted 2 nights. On the third, I ripped the blanket away and fell in front of it, gasping like a drowning man finally breaking the surface. The glass shimmered with satisfaction. That's when I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. The mirror didn't just show me death. It needed me to see it. Like a performance requiring an audience. Like a parasite feeding on attention. My gaze gave it strength. My horror nourished it. My obsession was its sustenance. And the more I watched, the more it grew. Because soon, the visions weren't confined to the glass anymore. They began to bleed into my apartment. I'd wake in the night to see a shadow, slumped in the corner, faintly lit, fading as I blinked. I'd catch sight of a body lying on the kitchen floor, pale and still, only for it to vanish when I turned on the light. Sometimes I heard whispers. Not words, not exactly, but the low, steady murmur of voices just beyond comprehension, echoing faintly through the glass like 1,000 people speaking from behind a wall. And sometimes the mirror showed me things before I sat down. I'd walk past and see it flicker with movement, my reflection bending when I hadn't bent, blinking when I hadn't blinked. Once it waved, slowly, mocking. I screamed and hurled a chair at it, wood splintering across the frame. But the mirror didn't even rattle. Its surface shimmered, unbroken, the faint smile of my reflection taunting me. I wanted to run, to leave, to abandon the apartment and everything inside. But even the thought made my chest tighten, because if I left, the mirror would still exist, still be out there, waiting for me. It wasn't something I could escape. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was tethered to me. One night, I tried something different. I sat in front of it, trembling, and whispered, "Why me?" The glass rippled, and for the first time, it answered, not in sound, never in sound, but in sight. My reflection dissolved, replaced by another room. A stranger sat before the mirror, his face gaunt, his eyes wide with terror. He whispered words I couldn't hear, clawed at his own hair, shook his head violently. And then he collapsed forward, dead. The vision snapped back to me. My heart froze. I understood. I wasn't the first. The mirror had belonged to others before me, each one drawn into its trap, each one drained dry by visions of inevitability, each one consumed. And now was my turn. The days blurred together after that. Time felt strange, slippery. Sometimes I'd wake and the clock would say morning, but the light outside was midnight black. Other times, hours passed in minutes, whole evenings vanishing while I sat unblinking before the glass. I stopped eating, stopped showering, stopped answering calls. The world outside dimmed into irrelevance. All that mattered was the mirror. The visions came constantly now, overlapping, colliding. I saw dozens of deaths each night, strangers, neighbors, old friends, people I hadn't thought of in years. Their final moments tumbled one after another, endless, relentless, until I felt like I was drowning in them. And then, one night, I saw something different. Not death. Not exactly. I saw myself, but not slumped, not lifeless. Alive, staring into the glass with the same desperation I felt now. But my reflection wasn't matching me. It was leaning forward, lips moving silently, eyes locked on mine with a burning intensity. I leaned closer, and for a split second I thought I could hear it. Faint, barely audible. Soon, then the vision snapped away. I fell back, trembling, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The mirror had never spoken before. Now it had, and I understood. It wasn't just showing me death anymore. It was preparing me. The rehearsal was ending. The performance was about to begin. The word hasn't left me. Soon, it echoed through me for days, rattling inside my skull until I could hardly breathe. I kept replaying that moment, over and over, the way my reflection had leaned closer, the way its lips had shaped the syllable, the weight of certainty in its eyes. The mirror had never spoken before, not once. And yet, when it finally did, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't even a threat. It was a promise. I tried to bargain with myself. Maybe soon meant years, decades. Maybe I would have time, enough time to find some way to destroy it, or to leave it behind. Maybe the mirror's grip wasn't absolute. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel in my bones. Time had been unraveling for weeks. The nights bleeding into days, the days collapsing into nights, hours slipping through my fingers like sand. I no longer trusted the clock, the sun, even my own heartbeat. All I could trust was the mirror, and the mirror was patient. The visions no longer waited for me to sit. They came whenever they pleased, bursting through the surface of the glass with no rhythm, no warning. I'd pass by and see a body slumped across the kitchen counter, then blink and see the same body standing and smiling alive again. I'd glance over my shoulder to find my reflection moving just a second out of sync, a fraction too slow, too deliberate. Sometimes I wasn't sure which side of the glass I belonged to anymore. One evening, it might have been evening or it might have been dawn, I couldn't tell. I sat before it, hollow-eyed and trembling. I whispered, "Show me." The surface rippled, and then it did. It showed me the room I sat in, the same chair, the same dim light, the The same blanket crumpled in the corner. But the air in the reflection felt heavier, darker, and there I was, slumped in the chair, eyes open but vacant, lips parted as though caught mid-breath. The same image it had shown me before. But this time I didn't look lifeless. I looked present, like I was waiting. And then, slowly, the reflection's head turned. Not in sync with me, not following my movements. On its own, it turned until its eyes met mine directly, staring through the glass with a hunger that froze my blood. And then it smiled. Not the faint flicker I'd seen before. A wide, deliberate grin. I staggered back, knocking over the table, books scattering across the floor. My reflection kept smiling, its head tilted slightly, like it was listening to something just beyond the glass. I screamed at it. I begged it to stop, to leave me alone, to let me go. My voice cracked, my throat raw. But the reflection only leaned closer, pressing its hands against the inside of the glass, fingers splayed wide. And then, for the first time, the mirror moved. Not the reflection, the mirror itself. The glass rippled outward, as though it were soft, pliable, like water bulging from a filled cup. I fell to the ground, scrambling backward, my chest heaving. The reflection pressed harder, its grin stretching too wide, its eyes shining with something feral. The glass bulged again, and then it stilled. The surface went flat. Just me again. My reflection staring back, pale, broken, terrified. I sat there for hours, waiting for it to move again. It didn't, but I could feel it. The air was charged, vibrating, thick with anticipation. It wasn't finished. It was waiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall, watching the mirror, every nerve in my body taut with dread. The silence in the apartment was unbearable, suffocating. Every creak of the building made me jolt. Every shift of shadow made me think the glass was moving again. And then, just before dawn, I blinked. And when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in the glass. I was sitting in the chair, staring out. And there on the other side, in my apartment, was me. The other me. Alive. Breathing. Staring in horror at the mirror. At me. I pounded at the glass, screamed for help, begged to be let out. My palms slammed against the surface, but no sound carried through. The other me only stared, wide-eyed, tears streaming down its face, shaking its head violently. And then, slowly, it turned away. It walked out of the room, leaving me behind. I screamed until my throat shredded. I pounded until my hands bled. But the glass held, cold and unyielding. And in the silence that followed, I finally understood. The mirror had never been showing me the future. It had been showing me this. The end wasn't a moment to come. The end was the moment I crossed over. And now, someone else sat in my body, breathing my air, wearing my skin, while I rotted inside the silver prison of glass. The other me would go on, live my life, smile my smile, pretend to be me. And I would stay here, forever, watching, waiting, smiling through the glass for whoever the mirror chose next.